What does it say? 57, 55, right? This is going to be hard. I'm competing against the last minute of the basketball game. Well, you know what? A few minutes ago, they were down 6. And then they kept roaring. They came roaring back to take the lead. Yeah! What does that tell you? Woo! That's what campaigns can do, and that's what countries can do. Hey, we're living a tough time right now, and I want to first of all thank Congressman Pompeo for coming out today and for his support. He's such a phenomenal leader, and I'm so grateful. And I want to thank Governor Martinez. She exemplifies and embodies everything the conservative movement should be about. And I want to thank you for coming, because tomorrow morning you have a big choice to make. And I want to talk to you about the choice you have. Because most of these elections are a choice between political parties. And in the case of a caucus, most of these are a choice between candidates. Right? You got a couple names on the ballot. In this case, at one point we had like 15 names on the ballot. But I want to convince you today that this election that you're about to undertake is not just a choice between people. It is a choice about what it means to be a conservative in the 21st century. And it is a choice about what America is going to mean in the 21st century. We are not the first generation to have to make that choice. In fact, that choice has been made by each generation for over 2 centuries. And now the time has come for us to make ours. So a moment ago, Governor Martinez told you her story, and she alluded to mine briefly. My parents and my story is one that I always share at the end of my speech. I'm going to open with it today, because I think it's not just my story, it's our story. My parents were born in another country. They were born on the island of Cuba. Neither one was born to privilege or power or wealth. My mother was one of 7 girls, raised in a rural community in Cuba. Her father was disabled as a child by polio, so he couldn't work physically. He struggled. He could work, but he couldn't do the labor on the farms, and so he struggled to provide for his 7 girls. You can only imagine how hard it was for a disabled man in a rural area in a developing country in the early decades of the last century. There's no welfare, no food stamps, there's no government programs. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. My mother says they never went to bed hungry. The girls didn't. She is pretty sure her parents did, so they didn't have to. My father had it just as hard. He was born in the city of Havana. 4 days shy of his 9th birthday, 4 days before he turned 9, his mother died. And as a result, the family business they had, which was kind of a catering business for cigar workers, went out of business. And if he wanted to eat, he had to go work, and he had to leave school. And so at 9 years of age, my father began working. And he would work for the next 70 years of his life, and he would never go back to school. As you can imagine, living in a society like that, they were kind of stuck. Because like most people that have ever lived in the history of the world, they lived in a place that basically said, unless your parents have money or have influence, you can only go so far. And they were stuck. And so in 1956, they came to the United States of America, the one place on earth where people like them could have a chance. Now, what's the score? 59? 59-55. All right. I'm just trying to delay until the game is over. By the way, this is a public service announcement. Don't lock your knees, please. People passed every one of my rallies this week. Someone's passed out because they locked their knees. I just don't want anybody to pass out. The insurance is not that good here, so. Especially if you have Obamacare. So when my parents first got here, life was hard. They never said, years later when I talked to them about it, my parents admitted to me that they were really discouraged when they first got here. In fact, their first couple of years here, they even thought about going back to Cuba. They thought, maybe we made a mistake. Because you have to understand, they had no money, they had no connections, they had no access to power, they didn't know anybody. They didn't speak English at the time. The first words my father learned in English, literally, were, I'm looking for a job. But I want you to know what their life looked like less than 10 years later. Less than 10 years after they arrived here under those circumstances, my dad by then was a bartender. That's all he was, a bartender at a hotel. And my parents bought their first home, less than 10 years after they arrived here with nothing. I want you to think about what happened over the next few decades. They never became rich or famous, but my parents were very successful people. You know why? Because working as a bartender and my mother as a maid, they didn't just own a home, They were able to raise a family. They were able to retire with dignity. And you know the most important thing of all for them that they achieved, that gave their life purpose and meaning? They left all 4 of their children with a life better than their own. I tell you that story not just because I want you to know about me, but because that's who we are as a nation. That is literally who we are as a people. You see, most of you I have never met in person. I don't know the details of your life and your upbringing, but I know enough about America to know that here in this country, all of us are but a generation or 2 removed from a story not dissimilar to the one I just told you. Yep. We are all just 2 generations removed from grandparents. Maybe they came from another country, maybe they didn't. But grandparents that did incredible things so your parents could have a better life. We are all... We are all a generation removed perhaps from parents who did that for you. Maybe your father worked 2 jobs. Maybe you were raised by a single mother who struggled because she wanted you to have all the opportunities she never did. Or maybe I'm describing you right now. Maybe you're the ones that are working hard and sacrificing, who perhaps have given up on the dream you have for yourself because you have made it the purpose of your life to leave your children better than yourself. And the reason why I tell you this is because this has a name. It is called the American dream. People all over the world want this. This desire to leave our kids, to have a better life, to fulfill your potential that God has instilled in you. This is a universal hope. But what has made America so special is that it has been possible for millions of people here, while nearly impossible for millions and millions of people almost anywhere else. And here's the thing about that American dream. It wasn't an accident. It didn't come to us through the air that we breathe or the water that we drink. It doesn't get passed down from generation to generation through the bloodstream. It is, in fact, a choice. We have chosen to be that kind of country. For over 2 centuries, each generation chose to be that kind of country. And that means that for over 200 years, each generation in our history has had to confront great challenges and solve big problems and make sacrifices and embrace opportunities. And that is why we are a country that for over 2 centuries, each generation has left the next better off than themselves. Well, now the time has come to make that choice again. Now the moment has arrived for this generation to choose what kind of country are we going to leave behind. And there are only 2 ways forward. Our children will either be the freest and the most prosperous Americans ever, or we're going to be the first Americans that leave their kids worse off than themselves. If we stay on the road we are on right now, we will be the first Americans that leave their children worse off than themselves. That is the consequences of 8 years of Barack Obama. That is the consequences of 2 decades of political failure by both political parties. A national debt that's close to $20 trillion. An economy that is stagnant and can no longer compete on the global scale. Changes to our economy that we haven't kept up pace with. A federal government that's grown too large, too expensive, too burdensome. And the result is what we're facing. And by the way, an all-out assault on the constitutional principles that limited that government and protected our fundamental liberties. We cannot remain on the road we are on right now and hope to give our children what was given to us. And that means that Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton cannot be president of the United States, because that's the road they will choose. And therefore that means we must win this election. Because the consequences of losing in November are not just that we lost an election. The consequences of losing in November is that we will have allowed the same problems we have today to remain in place. We have to win.
Yes. Have to.
And how do we win? We nominate someone in this party that truly is a conservative, that believes in the principles that have made this nation great to begin with. I didn't just start pretending to be a conservative a year and a half ago. a 15-year record of turning conservative ideas into conservative action. When I was served in the Florida legislature for 8 years, it's a part-time job. I was the Speaker of the Florida House, and the third largest state in the country. And let me tell you what we did while I was there. We fixed our public school curriculum, not through the federal government. We did it at the state level, where those decisions belong.
Yes.
We protected school choice. We protected homeschoolers. We protected parent involvement and parent empowerment. We increased vocational training. You know why? Because America needs more welders, and machinists, and pipe fitters. Yes. And we could probably do with less philosophers. We balanced our budget every year. We cut taxes, all in the middle of an economic downturn. We made a difference. We even passed eminent domain laws that are among the strongest in the country. Now, what does that mean? I'm not saying this would ever happen. I'm just saying theoretically, if a private developer tried to take your property using eminent domain to build a hotel, let's just say that happened. You can't do that in Florida because of a law that I passed. And then, because of term limits, I support term limits. I'm in favor of term limits at the federal level. By the way, I'm not running for re-election to the Senate. Next January, I will either be the President of the United States or a private citizen, and with your help, I'll be the President of the United States. But in 2010, I had the chance to run for the Senate, and I saw the direction our country was headed under Barack Obama. And I said, we have to stop this direction. It's the same reason you got involved, Governor. And so I had to run for Senate against the sitting governor of Florida, who claimed to be a Republican at the time. He was a Republican. He was at 70% approval rating, but I knew him. I had worked with him. And the entire Republican establishment was against me. And we took him on, and we won. And when I started that race, the only people that thought I could win all lived in my home. And 4 of them were under the age of 10 at the time. But we ran and we won, and I was proven right. I said at the time, this guy who's running as a conservative is not a conservative. He's pulling a scam on us. I know him. I know what's going to happen. And I was proven right. Before that race was even over, he switched to an independent. Wow. Then, after that, he switched to Democrat and ran for governor 2 years later. Now he's become a vegetarian. I mean, he just keeps switching. Wow. And as I was informed this morning, I think it's illegal, or at least highly discouraged, to be a vegetarian in Kansas. By the way, this election is so close, I shouldn't be offending anyone, including vegetarians. So, I have nothing against vegetarians. I don't get it, but I'm not against it. What's the point of life? Never mind. It's like, so, and we won, and I'm proud of the work we've done in the Senate. It is true, I haven't lived as long as some of the people running for president, but let me tell you, on the Republican side, no one running for president has more experience or a better understanding of our national security issues than I do. And by the way, if that wasn't true, Congressman Pompeo would never have endorsed me, because no one is more serious about intelligence matters and national security than he is. And so, we need someone that's going to run for, and I'm proud of the other work we've done in my time in the Senate. We brought accountability to the VA. I actually worked with Bernie Sanders to make it legal to fire VA executives that aren't doing a good job. Now, we don't agree on anything else, though, so we agreed on that. We put sanctions on Hezbollah. I led the effort to wipe out the Obamacare bailout fund. We dealt with human trafficking in the Girls Count Act. These are real achievements, and I'm proud of them. But it's not enough. It's not enough. We cannot change the direction that a bad president has put us on unless we elect a strong president.